I did not make the same mistake when we did the math curriculum. There we did a single math program for the entire system. It was Turk Investigations Elementary, Connected Math, middle school, very challenging. It wasn't just procedural mathematics. The teachers and the curriculum were grounded in the development of the understanding and application of mathematics, and you had to have a great deal of professional development and training and building the capacity in the teachers to be able to do the job. Well, guess what? Fortunately, final superintendency, I had a lot of political capital. First year, flat scores. Second year, flat scores. Third year, flat scores. Now, in a lot of places, people with flat scores the first year or by the second year, they junk it and start over. That's often the pattern in education. Fourth year, fourth and eighth grade math, on a trajectory up. And every year since, even in the 4 years since I've been gone, the math scores in Boston have been going up. And there's an urban NAEP trial with about 20 urban school districts that have the National Assessment of Educational Project scores for their district when they normally just go to the state. And Boston, on the math, has been up in the top quartile, along with Austin, Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and their wonderful school districts. They don't have quite the low-income student impact that Boston does. And it just goes to show you at that standard, and again, Massachusetts has the most rigorous assessment, state assessment of any of the states in the country. That was a real big win. But it took that 3 years of nervousness and so on with lots of good professional development to get there. Let me move now to the more specific about human capital. You may have your own views about the quality of teacher training institutions across the country. There are some very good ones and some very weak ones and some very much in between. But the predominant approach to training teachers is driven by certification in states to get your license on the one hand, and the views in most teaching colleges and universities that coursework, because that's what colleges and universities do, ought to be where you get most of your learning. My view is that rather than have 75 or 80% classroom learning at an external place, in a college or university or somewhere else, needs to be flipped. And 80%, 75% needs to be clinical training, not unlike a teaching hospital where there's significant clinical experience over a complete year for teachers to learn in a school setting, not just a 3-week or even a 3-month out there with a teacher who happened to go through that teacher training institution and say, oh, I'm going to have an intern. That'll be cool. I'll do that for 3 months. So we started a Boston Teacher Residency Program. And with the great support of Dave Driscoll, who was the state commissioner, he cut all of the boundaries away and said, you can develop your curriculum. We'll allow that curriculum to entitle the students that satisfy your standards to get certified. And basically what we did was develop our own program with a 6-week summer program that was really focused on book learning and so on. And then 4 days out of 5 during the entire academic year, full-time with accomplished teacher in a classroom in schools. And then putting groups of residents into schools with teachers. And one of the wonderful consequences of that started to change the culture in those schools. Because the teachers that came through that program and were focusing on clinical experience, they didn't buy into the culture of isolation in schools where teachers go into their classroom, close the door, do the best they can with what they've got, which unlike most professions, if you think about human capital, there's a lot of teaming and learning from each other and value added that comes out of that. So another strategic approach was, what do you do with teacher time when you've got some access to it? So the union contract, teachers had a certain number of planning periods, and in the elementary, the principal got to control one of them. So we started common planning time, where we take a group of third grade teachers or sixth grade or at the high school level, English teachers, and then we put them in a room together. Well, quick aha, you can't just do that because they've never had the experience of really collaborating and knowing what to do and what to work, how to work together. And so we used some of our coaches to facilitate initially in order for that to take hold. They brought in examples of student work. We did this system-wide. It was systemic. So they looked at writing. They had to develop a rubric for how that goes. And it had an incredible impact in terms of teachers learning together, owning what they were doing, being up against the wall when their work didn't look as good as their colleagues, and then reaching out for help and support. That was a systemic kind of strategy, but it didn't happen overnight. And it took 3 to 4 years to get it really going in a deep way. So the evidence is there. There were a lot of strategies, and the big issue is where you put the emphasis and the focus. You've got to go deep with a few strategies and provide the support along the way. Because if you're going to recruit teachers, you're going to hire them, you're going to induct them, you're going to train them, you've got to have those kind of strategies along the way to get the work done. The other thing is that it became a pipeline for getting people to take teacher leadership roles on the instructional leadership team. And when they're putting together a strategic plan for the school aligned with what the district expects, when you have a group of teachers working with the principal, then it's not only the principal that has to go out and sell it to the rest of the teachers that have been part of it and own it are doing it with their colleagues. And that makes a huge difference in terms of what gets moved forward. So it is an opportunity to look at all of these variables. Final point, accountability for results. The essentials of whole school improvement, which I haven't got time to go into in any more detail, but the issue about autonomy, and we had pilot schools in Boston that were like in-district charters. That's an interesting debate. Should autonomy be granted based on a bet that the capacity is there in the people to execute and do the work and produce good results for children? Or should it be based on evidence? So the first approach is the venture capital approach. Sometimes you hit big time, and other times you go under. So I've always been more on the side of let's have some evidence before autonomy is granted. And with all of the choices that are out there now, that debate continues. And there is good evidence and bad evidence in both regards. So it really does come back to the skill that the people have, the strategy for supporting the people in the organization, helping them grow and develop. Final note, the generation of students that I'm seeing at Harvard who are mainly in the master's program in the late 20s, I've taught for 5 or 6 years, I'm really worried about where the teachers are going to come from. But I will tell you this, that most of them are not going to buy into a 185-day year, a culture that in too many places has them doing the same kind of thing their first year as their 5th year, their 10th year. I'll take that back. Maybe first 5 years is growth and development. Research says after the 5th year, not an awful lot. I think we're going to have a different human capital strategy in terms of having people come in who are smart and good and work for 5 or 6 years. We develop more leadership opportunities for people who want to stay in the classroom and some real opportunities for moving into other kind of leadership experiences earlier in their career rather than having to hang around for 15 or 20 years before somebody thinks they might be able to be an assistant principal or a principal or move on to another leadership role. So that's the challenge, and I think there's evidence in a number of places that it's starting to take hold. But scalability is still not where we want it to be, and hopefully this shared learning that is going on now among some of the districts that have done better than others will lead to others saying, oh, we're not that confident that we think we're doing it, we want to learn from you. And we've got to do a better job of going to the places, seeing where the best practice is, and then helping people take that on with support in their own classrooms, their own schools, and their own districts to make a positive difference for children and graduate them ready for some kind of continuation without remediation at community college, college or university to access a good life and a good career. Thank you very much.